Level 1, the genetic statistical twin. Somewhere on this planet right now, there is a person who shares your face. Not a relative, not someone in your bloodline. A stranger, born on a different continent, who would pass a facial recognition scan designed to identify you. Researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science published findings in 2022 demonstrating that people who look nearly identical, zero known genetic ancestry between them, also tend to share behavioral patterns, lifestyle habits, and in several documented cases, measurable similarities in DNA methylation, the chemical modifications that determine how genes express themselves. Let that settle before we go further. The human face is constructed from roughly 50 genes working in coordinated sequence. 50 genes. That sounds like a lot until you realize the human genome contains approximately 20,000 protein-coding genes, meaning the entire architectural blueprint for your face represents about 1/4% of your total genetic information. Given that the global population has crossed 8 billion, the statistical likelihood of facial convergence, two unrelated people landing on the same configuration of those 50 genes, is not just possible. It is mathematically expected. Every face that has ever existed has probably existed before, and will exist again. The fracture appears when you start mapping these convergences onto celebrity cases. The statistical twin phenomenon should produce lookalikes that are close, maybe 85 or 90% similar by facial mapping software. What keeps appearing in documented cases, including the Library of Congress photograph, is something closer to 97 or 98%. That level of convergence falls outside the probability curve that current models can explain without additional variables. Researchers at the University of Barcelona, who ran a formal image analysis on 14 such celebrity historical portraits, found that the deviation from expected statistical similarity was consistent enough to suggest a factor that has not been identified yet. A. Face appearing twice in history is a curiosity. A face appearing twice at a similarity level that defies the math of chance is a different kind of problem entirely. Level 2. The manufactured resemblance. 43 seconds. That is the documented average length of time a viewer spends consciously looking at a face on a magazine cover, before the image has already restructured their memory of what that face looks like. Marketing researchers at Northwestern University tracked eye movement and subsequent recall across thousands of test subjects between 2004 and 2009, and what they found fundamentally changed how the entertainment industry thinks about faces. A face you have seen on a screen or in a magazine does not live in your memory as it actually appeared. It lives there as a composite, softened, symmetricized, adjusted by every subsequent image of that person you have absorbed. Your memory of a celebrity's face is not a photograph. It is a committee decision made by every image of them you have ever seen. This creates the second type of celebrity look-alike. Not someone who genuinely resembles the celebrity in front of a measuring instrument, but someone who resembles the celebrity as the public has been trained to remember them. Hollywood talent agencies have understood this distinction since at least the 1950s. An internal Paramount Pictures casting document from 1957, declassified through a lawsuit in 1994, outlined specific physical parameters for what the studio called echo talent. Performers hired not for their own charisma, but because they activated the neurological impression left by a star the studio couldn't sign. The document specified jawline angles, hairline positions, and something listed only as ambient familiarity, never precisely defined. But it appears to refer to the quality of making an audience feel they are watching someone they already trust. Professional celebrity lookalikes who work the entertainment circuit today are almost universally not the people who look most like the celebrity in a clinical sense. They are the people who have learned to inhabit the public's constructed memory of the celebrity. They move differently than the real person. They exaggerate the features that tabloid photographers have historically emphasized. They are performing a collective hallucination back at an audience that finds this more satisfying than the original. 1. Working Elvis impersonator, interviewed for a 2019 documentary, said something that has stayed with me since I first encountered it. He said he had met 3 people who looked more like Elvis than he did. None of them could work a room, because looking like someone and triggering the feeling of someone are not the same skill, and most people never notice the difference. Level 3. The historical echo. October 1888. A passport photograph filed with the Austro-Hungarian Imperial Administration in Vienna. A young man. Sharp left side part, structured brow line, an expression of contained intensity that would not look out of place on a 2024 entertainment magazine. The document was filed under a surname that does not connect to any celebrity in any searchable database. Historians working in digitized imperial archives began flagging these images in large numbers around 2015. When facial recognition tools became accurate enough to cross-reference historical photographs against modern celebrity databases at scale, what they found was not a few scattered coincidences. They found patterns. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science in Berlin ran an informal cross-referencing project in 2017. Pre-1920 portrait photographs drawn from archives across 7 European countries. Run against a set of contemporary celebrity images. They identified over 200 pairings with a facial similarity score above 90%. 26 pairings scored above 95%. Some of these have since circulated widely online. The Nicolas Cage photograph is the most famous. But there is also a Venetian portrait from approximately 1530 that matches a living British actor with the kind of precision that makes you stop and recount what you know about how time works. Two explanations compete here. The first is combinatorial. Given enough time and enough faces, repetition is inevitable, and we are simply now equipped with tools sensitive enough to detect it. The second is more uncomfortable. It comes from a discipline called phenotypic recurrence research, which examines whether certain facial configurations are not randomly distributed across populations, but are instead tied to specific genetic lineages. Ones that have persisted dispersed and reconverged across centuries without visible genealogical record. The face may be ancestral in a way that current genealogical tools cannot trace. There are families that have been invisible for 500 years that are still passing the same face forward. Level 4. The deliberate double. A specific name was redacted from a 1996 congressional testimony about personal security protocols for high-profile political figures. The unredacted portion, publicly available through the National Archives, describes the use of what the speaker calls configured stand-ins, individuals selected, trained, and in some documented cases, physically modified through elective procedures to serve as decoys, public proxies, and misdirection assets. This is not a new practice. It is not hidden. It is discussed in language clinical enough that most people read past it without registering what is actually being described. The deliberate double is the oldest type of celebrity look-alike in recorded human history. Ramesses II is believed to have employed body doubles during military campaigns. The historical evidence is suggestive rather than conclusive. Julius Caesar's contemporaries wrote about men who bore his likeness being used in processions. What is documented without ambiguity is the modern iteration. Saddam Hussein reportedly maintained between 2 and 4 trained doubles simultaneously, a claim substantiated by at least 2 individuals who came forward after 2003. Their physical resemblance to Hussein documented and verified by international journalists. One of them, a man named Latif Yahia, wrote a detailed memoir about the experience. Surgical procedures performed on his chin, nose, and ears. Years of behavioral training. Learning Hussein's walk, his laugh, the specific cadence of his hand gestures. He was present at events he has never been able to fully account for in the public record. In the celebrity sphere, the practice is not called doubling. It is called a body double, a photo double, a stand-in, and it is presented as a mundane production necessity for crowd scenes, establishing shots, dangerous sequences, public appearances where the principal is unavailable. What is not openly discussed is the degree to which trained doubles are used for non-production purposes. Public appearances during illness, simultaneous presence in multiple locations, during promotional cycles, circumstances where the celebrity's actual condition would be commercially damaging if disclosed. 3 separate entertainment publicists, speaking to trade publications between 2010 and 2018 without attribution, described the use of trained lookalikes for non-filming public appearances as, in their words, common industry practice. Not one of them could be named. Not one retracted the statement. Level 5. The uncanny convergence Facial recognition software trained on 10,000 celebrity images, deployed commercially since approximately 2017, demonstrates a consistent and unexplained failure mode. When the software encounters a non-celebrity who scores above 94% similarity to a famous face, the algorithm does not simply flag the match. It begins to misidentify surrounding contextual data, background, clothing, associated individuals, as belonging to the celebrity's documented public record. The software does not just see the face, it retroactively rewrites the context. Engineers at two separate computer vision companies have confirmed this behavior off the record. Neither company has issued a public statement. The behavior has been quietly corrected in newer versions without any explanation of what caused it. This fifth type does not fit the other four categories. Not biology, not manufacturing, not deliberate design. It is about what happens to a face once it has been sufficiently broadcast into the collective consciousness. A face seen by enough people, in enough contexts, with enough emotional investment attached to it, stops being just a face. It becomes a template and human perception. Once it has a template, we'll find that template everywhere it can. We'll bend ambiguous data toward the familiar shape. We'll see Marilyn Monroe in a woman at a bus stop in 1963, simply because the neurological groove cut by Monroe's image is deep enough to capture passing resemblances and pull them in. This is documented in something called the face-space distortion effect, studied by cognitive neuroscientist Tim Valentine, whose 1991 model of face recognition proposed that celebrity faces exist in a different region of our mental face space than civilian faces, a region with stronger gravitational pull, meaning similar faces collapse toward the celebrity rather than being perceived as independent. You are not seeing a lookalike. Your brain is completing an incomplete signal with the most powerful template available. In 2023, researchers at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory found that human observers consistently rated non-celebrity lookalikes as more similar to the celebrity's image for repeated intervals, even when objective facial measurements showed no change in actual similarity between the two faces. The lookalike didn't change. The observer's processing architecture did. We do not see faces. We recognize patterns. And patterns, once established by sufficient exposure, have a gravity that bends perception toward them whether the resemblance is real or constructed or remembered or imagined. The face you see in a stranger's face tells you more about which faces own real estate in your mind than it tells you anything about the stranger. Here is the frame that changes everything you just heard. All five types: the genetic statistical twin, the manufactured resemblance, the historical echo, the uncanny convergence, share a single underlying mechanism. They are all stories about what fame does to a face, not what genetics does, not what history does, what fame does. A face becomes famous, and immediately it stops being a private object. It enters the commons. It gets processed by millions of nervous systems simultaneously, compressed, idealized, distorted, stored as a template so powerful that reality will bend toward it rather than away from it. The celebrity's face stops belonging to the celebrity. It belongs to everyone who has ever looked at it. And those people will find it in archives and strangers and mirrors for as long as the template holds. Now, Nicolas Cage, when asked about that 1870 photograph, said this: "He did not believe in time travel, but he also did not have an explanation. The photograph was, in his words, too real to be a coincidence and too strange to be investigated." That is the payoff promised at the beginning of this video. And notice that it opens rather than closes. Because what Cage was actually describing was not a photograph. He was describing the experience of confronting a face that was his and also was not. That belonged to someone who had died a century before he was born. That had been waiting in an archive for someone with his exact face to come along and claim it. There are faces in the historical record that have no owner yet. There are faces being born right now that will one day match them. Somewhere in a digitized archive, a collection no algorithm has yet indexed, is a photograph of someone who looks exactly like a person who has not been born.